This episode comes with support from Twinmotion and Monograph's Section Cut Conference. You'll hear more about both of those later on in the show.
Why do my headphones squeak?
Get those checked out.
I think I'm going to have to find some WD-40 for my damn headphones.
Yeah, I might have been through a lot. There's super glue holding some of mine together. Super old.
I had a pair of Bose over-the-ear headphones that I got like what felt like decades upon decades ago. But that I did the same thing. It's like once I started letting the kids wear them, then of course they got abused, and I was just like, "But these are great headphones."
Yeah, it's hard to let something. It's like they still kind of work. I guess I'll keep using them.
Yeah. They were just they had so fallen apart. I didn't know if super glue could hold super glue together.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, well, sad, but we'll move on.
The process is the same in welding. You weld something, and then you're like, I think I'm going to weld right over that one because that doesn't look so good, or it doesn't look like it's actually doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah. How's that adventure been going?
Oh, man, I'm so tired. I enjoy it, and I don't enjoy it at the same time. So it's kind of like real work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like my shoulder's just so angry.
What the hell are you doing?
And I've had some realizations over this. That number one, the body is aging, even though the mind is like, no, you're fine. You're fine. Keep going.
Can do this.
Keep going. You've got this. The other is, I think one of the big disconnects in our industry, I guess I should say, not our profession, but our industry, where there's several different players within, that are handing off the baton, as it were, is I can't believe how much time I spend procuring and figuring out sequencing, procuring materials, tools, not procuring tools, but figuring out which tools are the right tools to use. I already have all the tools there. But that's a big one too. It's just the number of tools it takes to do a thing is insane. Oh, gosh, insane. Yeah. And that's really where like the whole do-it-yourselfer thing it's really tough, right? It's just because
it's like, I could save so much money doing this if I did it myself. It's just like, yeah, but
if you have all the tools.
If you already had the thousands of dollars of tools.
And you have to amortize the value of those over a very long period of time to see that value returned. And
if you're just doing a one and done.
Right. It's not worth it if you do that. And then so that brings up this idea of like, oh my God, I just wish me and my buddies had a database of what tools we have so that we can just know who has what and when I can borrow it. That would be fantastic. And I'm sure that kind of thing exists, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It's just like, I feel like I'm my own personal Home Depot, and I'm sure everybody else does too, but we all have a little bit different things. I mean, how many hammers does somebody need to own? Why do I own so many goddamn hammers?
It depends on what type of hammer you need.
Yes, it does. And then there's just the amount of time I spend dealing with the system, right? The stores, and the returns, and the trying to find the things, and we're out. Well, where do I go now, right? Can you recommend anybody? Nope. It's in a box up there on that top thing. I got to go get a forklift to get it down. Okay. Like, just so much time is spent dealing with that side of things. And so that to me is like where, again, we just don't understand what it actually takes to get something built in the real world.
Well, so then let me also ask you, so if nobody's been paying attention, what we're talking about is your back deck.
Amongst, and peripheral projects.
And so did you have to go through the permitting process and everything else as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then you had to dealing with that, making sure that all of your documents were up to snuff, and you're under. Do you have to have inspections and things like that as well?
Yes, yeah. So you got to
See, so
coordinate all that. Yep.
exactly. So these are all of the things that people don't see when they basically purchase, design and build turnkey services, is all of those things. The fighting for, materials, because especially now amongst any other time in more recent history, with the whole basic shutdown of the entire, kind of construction industry for a very large part of last year and early part of this year, now that so then of course all of the manufacturers basically ramped down because there was no demand.
Well, and they had to close their plant down because they couldn't.
Had to close their plant down too. Exactly.
Yep. Sorry.
And no. And so, so now that everybody's ramping back up to get moving on all of their projects and stuff, the supply outweighs the demand. I mean, right now everybody's demanding everything. All of the large scale projects, all of the small scale projects, all of the, weekend warrior projects, everybody is trying to do their projects all at the same time. And so people don't understand. It's like, wait, last year you quoted me X price. Mm-hmm. Well, this year, because that same sheet of plywood now costs, 10 times as much. Exactly. Why don't you go out and buy yourself a Ferrari?
Right.
Because you'd be able to get that quicker and cheaper than that sheet of plywood.
Yeah, I think it was 300% at one point.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Just for like OSB as an example. I can give you two examples of that actually. So my decking material is Trex composite decking. So and you can roll your eyes and
no.
I'm not a pure. No, I'm talking to the audience right now, and they can all send their complaints to you as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I'll tell them about maintenance, durability, longevity.
Exactly. But at the same time, working with it is not as satisfying as working with wood. It's like a wet noodle. It's so floppy. So, and speaking of that, I went to pick up a 16-foot long board, which, another nice thing about it, I have to say, is the things are straight. I mean, I complain about them being a wet noodle, but they don't cup and bow and twist, and they don't do any of that because they're like the chicken McNugget of wood, right?
Wait, you're saying that chicken McNuggets aren't real?
Yeah. There's no McNuggets in chicken. Chicken don't have nuggets. Yeah, so picked one up, snapped right in half. And so clearly there was a flaw. It was like it wasn't, and they also don't break like wood breaks. Like they don't split and they don't
splinter.
They don't splinter. But it just kind of snapped in half, right? And so obviously there was something wrong. Either the forklift damaged it when they delivered it during moving it around, or it was a manufacturer's defect or something. So it snapped right in half. This is a 16-foot long piece, right? And it is seriously the last piece I needed. And I did make the mistake of, with this particular like edge trim piece, it doesn't have these special grooves in it, so you have all the hidden fasteners and stuff. Mm-hmm. I ordered exactly how many I needed. Everything else I had a little bit extra, which is like a contractor 101 kind of a thing. Always buy more than you need and then return what you don't use. Because stuff happens, it just does. And so this one, stuff happened, and a month out is my latest quote. After all of the crazy crap I had to go through to get these returned, it's an insane amount of back and forth, misunderstanding, incompetence, all kinds of issues that I've had to deal with as being the design builder myself, and not just saying, hey, contractor, come do this thing for me. And they would handle all that, right?
Right.
A month out for that. Shade sails, sunbrella material. Have to do... I just can't talk this morning.
Too much dust and...
paint fumes. So, sunbrella material, 2 years out.
Holy crap.
So, okay, plan B, plan C, I don't know what. I'm going to figure out something else. Do something temporary. I don't know what. But it's one of those things where it's like, I didn't see that coming, right? and it is the weekend warriors. Like the supply is bought up and used.
Mm-hmm.
The demand is high, and there were the closures. There were all the different COVID related stuff that the manufacturers had to deal with, including logistics and warehousing and all these things. And it all adds up to all I want is canvas, and it's 2 years away.
Yeah, and there's even go like you talk about the closures and the ramping down of materials and stuff like that. Then there was just the fact that there were companies that didn't survive, and so they don't. So now you got less people in the marketplace that are making things,
Mm-hmm.
and we've even had where we specified somebody who was a reasonable company that we had been using for quite a while that didn't survive the COVID shutdown. And so when our project went out to bid, when they're like, your basis of design doesn't exist anymore, and they're like, and we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah, and how do you get updated
like,
on that? It's not like they're going to send out a bunch of communication letting everybody know that they're shutting down. It's just not on the list of things to do.
Right. And it's not like they don't know who's actually like specifying the material. So
right.
And so now you have few less people out in the marketplace that are actually like offering whatever material it is that you're looking for. And so and then you've got a bunch of like startups that are trying to fill the void. But then you have especially for my particular project where we're working with an established institution that wants established institutions providing the materials for them.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that
warranties
they're still going to be around.
Right.
So they want to make sure that the people who are supplying the material are going to be around too to take care of it.
Yep.
So there's all sorts of craziness going on out in the marketplace, and obviously I was told you that our project for Hopkins we just got most of all of our bids back, and of course we saw quite a considerable escalation.
I was going to ask about that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So can you give like an order of magnitude kind of a
it about 30%.
Hmm.
I mean, I could give you exact numbers, but I don't think I'm allowed to.
Right.
So
yeah, no, that's why I was asking. Like 30% is huge, and I mean we've been seeing that now for a little bit.
It's mammoth when you think about like
scale of this project.
The scale of this project, the dollars that we're dealing with. 30% is huge, and so then the question is well, what does the owner do? I mean, we were always working towards kind of value engineering, value management within the whole design process, just trying to toe the line of their initial budget to make sure that we were kind of like following, because, it was a tight budget and it's an institution, and, their money doesn't grow on trees, and they've got to go out and get donors. They've got to go out and get,
fundraising,
capital,
yep.
Fundraising, all of this stuff. And so, it's not easy for them to just say, oh yeah, and by the way, your building's going to cost 30% more than what it originally was.
Right.
And so the question for them is, do they wait on the project? Do they value engineer more of it out? And of course, as we all know, when was the last time value engineering actually provided any real value?
Yeah. See previous episodes.
Exactly. So there's this decision that has to be made, or do we go out for more fundraising? All of this stuff is things that the university needs for to be competitive with all of their peer institutions for a state of the art medical institute, like medical research institution. It's not like they're like, okay, so what can we cut out of this?
Mm-hmm.
As they stroke their chin, trying to think of like, do we like, we had already, through the process of this, we had lopped off floors, we had lopped off program, we had lopped off all sorts of like what in our mind would be like large dollar items. And like right now we're at a reasonable building at what we thought was an affordable price. And you can kind of insert eye roll about
mm-hmm.
like what you consider affordable price.
Yeah.
But Now you just, now like this and every other project is, like, okay, so what do I do now? I mean, do I just wait to do this project until the prices maybe settle out? Like
Will that ever happen is the question.
exactly. It's like, will that ever happen? Will the manufacturers ever get to the demand? I mean, will they like ever reach, I mean, cause like, you know, think about this, like every other project is out there chomping at the bit to have another project drop off so that they can move up in the queue. Um,
Yeah.
and so if you put yourself at the back of the queue, then you're more or less screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. There was some tweet by, I think Randy Deutsch did this. He put up a graph showing that construction material prices had fallen 50% since whatever the last time was. So my response was, and I think it had to do with wood in particular. And it was, because everybody was talking about how expensive wood got. Yeah. Prices are down 50%. So now they're only, 150% of what they used to be.
Well, the funny thing is that maybe wood prices have definitely started to come down. But when people were looking for alternatives to wood, like, hey, let me switch to metal studs or things like that, that price still hasn't equalized. In fact, that price started to go up now that the demand for alternate to wood started to happen. Prices started to escalate. And so when we were seeing like just select portions of the market rise in costs because of demand, we were seeing other ones, kind of like holding. And then when people started to shift to other like alternatives, we saw just demand kind of like equalize and just raise just across the board. So not just like one particular sector of like, say, wood, but then metal stud, then cladding, then, it's like, okay, so I can't get a sheet of OSB. So now I'm going to go to, some kind of like gypsum type product. And then you go to a gypsum product and they were actually holding at a reasonable cost, or at least at like the market value, pre-COVID. And now they're starting to elevate in price. And so now you're starting to literally see all these different materials because the demands keep shifting from, okay, we can't get wood, let's do something else. And it just crap.
Yeah, right. Everybody's doing the same thing. It just doesn't work.
And then there's that opportunity to, slightly profiteer from panic.
Yeah.
And of course, you start to see as it's called, the natural, inflation, big fat air quotes there, isn't necessarily as natural as everybody is, assuming. It's more them just like hitting you with some pretty big stuff.
Yeah, and part of that is making up for previous losses. But you're right, it is also like the toilet paper episode, right? It's just like, now toilet paper is in high demand. We will charge a lot more money for it, or limit the amount that you can purchase.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, that
go ahead, sorry.
I have a new appreciation for how hard it is to actually build things.
Oh yeah.
And I always felt like I had a pretty good handle on that, but there's nothing like doing it again to reinforce that understanding and appreciation. It's like, holy crap, this is a lot of, like, I like working with steel. I like welding. There is a lot of prep work. What I like about it is you don't have to be as like gentle with it as you do with wood. Like you can't hurt it.
Right.
But when you're doing something, it's just like, wow, okay, first I cut it, then I, prep it, then I weld it, then I go back in and I clean it, then I deburr the weld, then I do some more sanding, and then and there's so many steps involved, because I think that's part of the disconnect that I was talking about when we started, was like, I did this drawing, it has these lines on it, make it look like this, right? There are so many steps involved to make it look like that. And what I'm building looks like child's play compared to the complex buildings that we design.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nothing like what the coordination and the sequencing and the trades and the expertise is involved in making that actually happen. So like the bigger picture then is like, how do we actually start to bring these puzzle pieces together so that there's, and it goes both ways. Like, I'm not trying to say like we suck as architects at appreciating this process. It goes both ways, but like there's not just two. There's so many pieces to the puzzle that don't appreciate what each other does.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Contractors do it right back to architects. They don't look at the drawings. You're doing it wrong.
Oh my God.
We don't build it like that. What can we change order? Right. Like there's so much like gamification of the projects
Oh my
that goes
gosh.
on. It's really it's a tangled web, right? It's very complex and it's very messed up. Like, oh my God, imagine what we could do if we all worked together, if we were all on the same team.
Yeah.
It would be incredible.
I just had this experience with an owner that was doing their own kind of like price verification, and they're just like, you got to make sure that everything is on, your drawings, because we're not looking at your, basis of design report. And we're like, wait, why? Because, the drawings at this stage, which is early in the process, are not going to show everything. And so most of your pricing should be if you're going to do a verification, then most of that should be coming out of the report, not the drawings.
Right.
The drawings are just there to kind of like quantify spaces at the very least. They're not there to do anything else. And so,
you have to be able to, you have to have something to give you like rough order magnitude scope, right? That's what the drawings are at this point.
Exactly. And so, but to go back to, what you were saying is that, if we work together, I mean, it's like, the contractors don't like, fully read the drawings. A lot of times they don't like look at the specs in relationship to the drawings. And so there's that whole, plight that we have, but then vice versa, we don't understand like current trends in construction and things like that. Or even, to the point of like how this conversation started, start talking about, we're going to design all of this stuff in X material or Y material, but not knowing the market and not knowing what that material cost is just as detrimental to a project as not reading a set of documents. Is because if you're trying to say, I want to build it out of this X, the whatever kind of wood, Ipe wood. Well, let's just throw an expensive one out there. But Ipe in the marketplace right now is, let's just say it's so expensive and it's so scarce. But we just draw this line in the sand that it must be this.
Yeah, you have to decide at some point.
Exactly. But then what happens is that it's really expensive, it's unattainable, and it's going to set your schedule back like, months upon months to just procure that. And so basically you have a mobilized contractor who sits around for months waiting on material when they could be using an alternate material or something like that. And so, you're right. Could you just imagine if we actually like work together?
Yeah. Right. And it is interesting, right, to think about how like a group like the one you're talking about here, where they want to do this cost analysis and verification, and obviously they don't trust anybody, but it's like you have to make decisions that have long-term impacts so that you can put numbers to them.
Right.
But at the same time, they want it completely flexible and so that you can just swap something out for another option without realizing the ramifications of that. And so you can't maintain that flexibility when you also want numbers. Right?
Right.
You can't. Like, that's why the lines start really loose, and it is rough order magnitude and
exactly
big scope, and there are large pads in there of margins, right? Because you need to have that. But at the same time, it's like, there's panic hardware on those doors, right? This was a quote that came up during one of my reviews in school, and it was like third year. It was like, those doors have panic hardware on them, right? And it's like,
what's panic hardware?
Who are you talking to right now?
I remember one time in second year, funny enough, that we had this design competition that we did a yearly basis in Auburn. It was called the Wood Comp, and it was sponsored by some large like timber company in the south, the Yellowwood, I think, if you have ever heard of them.
Nope.
So they, we had this competition, and I happened to be walking behind the professors, and I purposely kind of like slowed down to, of course, eavesdrop on what they were saying, and
glean some insight.
Well,
some
more
scholarly insight.
More because they were two away from mine, and I just wanted to hear what they said. And and I had this like beautifully like almost bat wing shaped kind of building that was cantilevered over this this creek with a waterfall and everything else. And they started talking about like it being unbuildable. And first I'm thinking to myself, it's second year.
Okay.
Nothing is buildable.
Better ground. You're like, sorry, I didn't make it out of CMU, guys. Jeez.
Well, funny enough, if like, I then started to hear the debate about like, my supports and all this other stuff and how actually like, short my cantilevers were. And like, they started to debate on whether or not it was buildable, which was interesting that they started to do that when they also didn't realize I was like standing practically right behind them, eavesdropping on them. And one of them was the professor in my studio. So, I if he would have turned around and be like, okay, just walking by.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, just walking by. But it was so funny that like they were just like, oh, you can't build this, and like, you haven't taught me how to build anything.
Where's your practical building knowledge now? Jeez.
Exactly. It's like,
should have had it back then.
Aren't you the professor of the materials and methods course
that I haven't taken yet?
That I haven't taken yet. You're talking about it not being buildable, and you know for a fact that I haven't taken your class. You fool.
Well, these adventures in contracting have definitely reinvigorated my awareness of the disconnects. Right? They're there. They're real, and you can draw the lines that represent the structure, but actually trying to figure out how to put that together and what the best way is, and making it to code and attaching it to X, Y, and Z for lateral and structural support and all these different things. And it's just, wow, there's a lot going on there.
Well, it also works to our benefit when we understand both sides of the trade, both the design side, the engineering side, the construction side of things. That when we are interacting with the client who wants to, cut your budget because they're not sure, all you're doing is just drawing some pictures, right? What value do you bring? Or how expensive is that piece of material? Or how hard can it really be to like frame this wall up? Like all of these different, aspects that the clients are always trying to find ways to cut the budget, but still get the same value or the same kind of like end result.
Yeah.
With not knowing that whole process through things. Architects who have the ability or have the experience of building things, of contracting things out on their own, can gain a greater respect for both our trade and their trade, but also should use that as an opportunity to be able to kind of like draw the line in the sand with the client and say, if this is your end result, if this is what you're trying to get, you've got to actually go through and pay for this particular process. I mean, properly, because if you don't, what you think you're going to get at the end is certainly not what you're going to actually get.
Right. It also reinforces to me, I agree, it is valuable. There's a big lack of it within the industry and our profession in particular. I mean, I guess, again, it goes both ways. But there's also, I totally get why people want to stay in their lane. It reinforces, it totally reinforces I'm just going to stick to sitting at the desk and drawing it because, there's a lot going on there that I don't want to know about. And like ignorance is bliss, right? On many levels. I can see why the risk aversion is real. I can see why people do stay within their realm of expertise only and really, treat it like it is a handoff. Okay, you guys figure this part out. Because it is a lot to do it all. It is a lot to do it. All of the pieces, for sure.
This episode is made possible with support from Twinmotion. This episode of the Archispeak podcast is made possible by Twinmotion. What if you could visualize your building in a couple of clicks, remove months from the design process, or create a bridge between stakeholders to solve problems before they even come up? Our friends at Twinmotion offer simple, real-time visualization for architects. Their technology lets you view and edit your scene on the go in the same pixel-perfect quality as the final rendering. Twinmotion seamlessly integrates with other tools like SketchUp and Revit, transforming your BIM or CAD models into high-quality images, panoramas, VR videos, or presentations. Sound complicated? Well, what if I told you that Twinmotion enables anyone to present the biggest ideas in the easiest way possible, regardless of previous CG experience? To download your exclusive free trial, head to twinmotion.link/Archispeak. That's twinmotion.link, not .com, /Archispeak. This episode is made possible with support from Monograph. Monograph is building a community of like-minded firm owners and operations leaders who are looking for solutions that align with their firm's values. On top of that, Monograph is building the only cloud-based practice operations software built exclusively for architects by architects. Monograph's easy-to-use and beautifully designed software allows you and your team to know in near real time whether you are on pace to deliver a project on budget. With Monograph, you and your team can plan project schedules, budgets, role assignments, and team members all in one place. The best part of Monograph? It doesn't require a degree in finance to use. To experience the difference today, sign up for a free trial at monograph.com. And to underscore their commitment to the community, on August 12th, Monograph will be hosting their first ever virtual conference. It's called Section Cut. This one-day event brings firm owners, operations leaders, and project leaders together to learn from success stories and workshops, all with a goal of improving their business. Reserve a seat at Section Cut today by visiting sectioncut.com.
There's it kind of reminds me of, like when I was saying that, like the understanding the process, understanding the expertise that goes into it, and then understanding like what that desired outcome is. Reminds me of, and for some reason I'm blanking on the name of that. There's a cake show where they like show a picture of, or they show an example of a cake that they want these.
Oh, you're talking about Nailed It.
Nailed It, yes.
Nailed It is awesome. That is a great show. It's on Netflix.
Isn't it sort of like that though? Where you're just like, I know what I want, but I don't know the process to get there.
That is the great example, because it's so true, and that show is so funny. Oh my gosh, if you guys haven't watched it, you have to watch that, because you're right. There's this chef that's on the show, who's one of the judges of the final output, and they bring in bakers who are totally amateur, right? Just household bakers, and they've likely never made anything close. And so then they show an example of what they want the contestants to make, and it is this amazing sculptural,
it's beautiful,
highly precise, beautiful cake. And then they're like, okay, and here's all the ingredients, go. Right. And they do give them like directions on how to do the different pieces, but they also give them an absurdly short amount of time, which, I mean, again, to bring it back to this analogy that you're talking about, everybody thinks is totally realistic, right? Oh, we could have the deck and the pergola in a week. That's because that's what we want, right?
Well, that's what we see on HGTV.
Totally. The expectations are set by this, behind the scenes editing magic, right?
I have a feeling, and it just dawned on me. I have a feeling that if you think about a lot of those home shows, they, used to like do a lot of that stuff like up in like the Northeast and stuff where a lot of those production companies were based. And they would even, what was it? There's a TV show, called Love It or List It. And so they used to, do these like home renovations and stuff like that. And it's just like, are you going to love your home, or are you going to list it? And all this other stuff. And so
after the competition's over, right?
But but you would notice that in the background, the scenery was always changing. Leaves were falling and all this other stuff, and snow on the ground and everything else. And so they've switched it actually to the kind of like I think it's either like North Carolina or South Carolina where it stays greener.
Evergreen.
You've got your evergreens.
We've recognized the flaws in our production schedule.
Exactly.
We want people to think this happens fast.
I totally bet that's the thing, is just like, boom, it happens overnight, because you watch this old house and you just like watch the entire seasons, like 2 years worth of seasons change
while they're redoing the floor.
While they're exactly.
That's real. That's authenticity
the
right there.
Exactly. But then you see like these other shows, it's just like, hey, we did this in a weekend. It's just like, really, did you? It's just like, oh God, there was this one show I watched where they would like, pick somebody up in one of their home, like the local Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, and say, hey, are you working on a project? And if they like said, yeah, you can come home with me, they would like come over and like bring their crew and all this other stuff and kind of like revamp your yard or something like that. But the amazing thing about it is that, they would come in and it's just like, hey, we've never seen your yard, but here are some detailed drawings of that yard that, we've never seen. And we're going to
swear it was a yard just like it.
Exactly. And we're going to go ahead and get, all of the permits and everything else and all of these inspections and all of this other stuff done in 15 minutes so that we can spend the next, 34 hours building you a brand new, thing and have it fully inspected and everything else. And then we can just like, surprise, here's your back. It's just like, come on, man. This is what's ruined our profession, because everybody thinks that end result, that cake, that beautifully sculpted cake, is what you can get in that short amount of time. And what you really get is that monstrosity, that unedible mess that people usually create.
I love it because in comparison to something like the Great British Baking Show, which has also been a guilty pleasure, right? You see what goes wrong during the process and how devastating it is to people because of the competition. They don't want to be sent home, right?
Exactly.
And where Nailed It, like they embrace the disasters, right? And they're like,
exactly,
because the show has this whole tongue-in-cheek mentality, whereas Great British Baking Show, right? You're going up against Paul Hollywood and Prue Hewitt, and you're gonna be judged and as if you are an expert.
Right.
It's so.
But I mean, but they're all, not only are the bakers, but the judges are all expecting that, kind of like perfection end result.
Right.
And so it's expected that, you're going to be bringing your A game and, you've done all of this stuff before. So you have the experience and the knowledge to work your way through things. Like you wouldn't have tackled your particular deck with both, like the wood framing and all of the steel trellises and stuff. You would not have tackled that if you had never done any of this stuff before.
And if I didn't own most of the tools already.
And if you didn't own, the thousands of dollars worth of tools
and if I just had a bank account full of money, I probably wouldn't have either, right? I just
exactly.
had somebody do it.
Exactly. But, so like you had the experience and also the confidence in yourself to be able to say, yeah, I've done this enough times where I can actually do this. And if you didn't have all of those tools, you probably wouldn't have, because then you would have realized as you started to buy those tools to do your project, you're like, holy crap, this is far more expensive than I thought. I mean, it's not just my sweat equity and a bunch of like raw materials, but it's everything else that goes into it.
And my wife is very like the grounded one, right? She's just like, before it even started, you need to hire somebody to do this, right? She knows like what it's like to go through these projects with me in particular, right? And it's just like some days it's fine, some days it's okay, some days it's really bad, but there's never like that euphoric feeling. And so
it sounds like life, right?
Yeah, she was just like, yeah, I told you to hire somebody to do this, right? And it's like, I look at it and I'm like, we would have never gotten this. We would have never gotten this, because that age-old battle that I was just kind of complaining about with contractors and architects and not trusting each other and not appreciating what they bring to the puzzle is exactly what I would have been up against, right? It would have been like, no, we do it this way. I mean, it was like when I built the pool at my last house, and the guy, we go out to stake it out, and the guy was like, this is 11'8" and 5/8", and he's like, no, just in feet. That's all we do. We only do it in feet. Like, what? But that was the mentality, right? It was, no, we do it a certain way. We don't do it like that. And
right.
So I would have got a very generic deck that everybody else would have had, with a very generic trellis with the cute little corners cut out of the wood beams and the joists, and it just would have, it would have had all exposed fat. It would have been a bunch of stuff. I can't actually say that, exactly how it would have turned out, of course, but I'm sure it would have been fine, but it wouldn't have been what I wanted, right?
Right.
And that's why I was really like, oh, and I have to do this one myself. Like, and I look at it and I'm really proud of the work. It was hard to get here, but at the same time, it's really rewarding, but only to me. Like, that's another thing I have to have a perspective on, is like, I see the flaws, right? But I also see the things that really worked out and the details. And neither one of those things are things that anybody else would really appreciate.
Exactly.
And it's like, is this adding value to your home, right? Which is kind of like the question that comes up all the time, right? Because that's all that seems to matter these days is that. And it's like, well, not for what it is. Like, it just could have been a deck, a generic deck, like super genero version. And it would have added the same value as mine, even though mine is 10 times nicer because of the effort that I put into designing the details to be as minimal as they are, right? And then actually executing that. Nobody cares. And that is also just something that I kind of close my eyes and shake my head about. It's like, that we can't get to those levels because nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this. You'd sent me a picture of your fire pit, and I was just like, ooh, where can I order one of those? Thinking to myself, you probably bought that thing. No, you built that thing. And actually, it's really nice, and it fits beautifully with the overall design. So, I know it wasn't finished, but I mean, it's still like it worked. And I was actually kind of floored that you built that.
Fabrication, man. Yeah. I mean, that was probably the most fun part of the project was design. Like, so the interesting thing about that, again, like getting into the weeds on this, is like, I knew how much steel I needed roughly to accomplish what I wanted, right? I drew a very a sketchy drawing of what I wanted to build. And then I just went to the steel shop and I looked on the remnant rack. What can I use to...
I love the remnant racks.
The remnant rack is awesome. And it was like, what can I use on this rack to get close to what I sketched?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody ever will ask me that question. Where did this design come from? Mm-hmm. They will just be like, hey, cool fire pit, right? But like going through that process of, okay, actually, and I also combined it with steel that I had left over from previous projects, right, in the garage. And so that it feels good to use that stuff, because otherwise it's been sitting around for a decade, right? I haven't done anything with it. And it's like, okay, what can I use on this rack? What can I use that's in my garage to make a thing? And to me, like that's a really cool process to go through. It's kind of like building something out of found materials, right? It's like when you go to some of these places, like I think we talked about it previously on episode, but I did this trek out one winter to this place called East Jesus, which is in Salvation Mountain, which is out by the Salton Sea, out east of Palm Springs. Yeah. And it's just like art installations made of found materials. Like you'll find this giant woolly mammoth made out of old tire pieces that were like roadkill, that semi-truck tires that had been shredded, and people had picked them up and they made a woolly mammoth out of it. It's kind of like that, right? But you're making something that's nice out of remnants, like leftover pieces. This one's got a dent in it. This one's got a little too much rust on it. This one was a cut that nobody wanted, right? And so then what can I piece together and make it look like exactly, to fit this design out of these kind of leftover pieces. And that is kind of a rewarding process to go through too, but it also takes a very open mind and kind of an ingenuity to say, okay, now that I know what pieces I have to work with, now I can design it and make it fit, and then I can build it, and I can practice welding some more, because it just never turns out. That's the hardest part about welding, right? It's like you weld it, it's done. Like that's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
There's no undo button on the welder. I wish there was. Like that's probably the most hardest thing to get.
Well,
through.
I mean, there is, isn't there? It's the plasma cutter.
Oh yeah, I would like one of those, please. I'll take that in a minute. But seriously, I think we're also so used to that undo mentality of iterating, right? Just copy it over here and try something else. And oh man, it's not like that in the real world when you're working with real materials. You cut that steel, you better have cut it too long and not too short, right? Exactly. You only get one more chance. And you weld it, and your helmet isn't dialed in just right so that you can see where you're going, and you start getting off track because and you're off track, like period.
See, and again, it's those little nuances of craft of that particular profession.
Really knowing your tools and really knowing how you have to dial things in, dial in that jig so that it holds the thing exactly how you want.
I mean, how many steel stairs have you designed for clients that
right.
You realize that you're at the mercy of the quality of the welder,
or the artistry of the fabricator, right?
Exactly.
Like what kind of welder are you going to use? Are you going to do that with MIG? You can do that with TIG, right? Like it, and just knowing those kinds of what the outcomes of using different tools are, and specifying that so that the drawings communicate that information to the person who's actually going to be making it.
Right. I don't know why we're harping on, or at least I'm about to start harping on like welding and stuff. But
I don't know why I'm about to go here, but
yeah, but I mean, just the and I kind of said this earlier in a different way, but like, so if architects are designing steel stairs or something like that, which I've done on numerous occasions,
one of my favorite things to do. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of the detailing that you can get out of that, as long as, you understand, which is where I'm going, is that when architects are designing these things, they really need to understand what the capabilities of what they're asking somebody else to do is. Because, there's a lot of times when, you say like a full pen continuous weld, and they're just like, well, what the hell does that mean? And what is the end result when I actually say that that's what I want? Not just saying that,
but knowing what it's going to look like.
But knowing what it's going to look like, because you could say it all day long, but if you don't know what it's going to end up looking like, and when you look at it and you're like, oh,
didn't want that.
I didn't want that. I wanted this. I'm like, well, then you should have asked for that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And really kind of like understanding the crafts that you're asking somebody else to do. Like if you're going to ask a carpenter to do something, know a little bit about carpentry. Even if you don't have to like swing the hammer yourself, know a little bit about what that end result is so that you can actually ask for the right thing.
And I think you can actually accomplish that just by watching a lot of stuff, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, that is when we grew up watching This Old House, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it came from that because we didn't get to do it ourselves, for instance, right? And you would watch Norm do it on the show, and it's like, okay, now I understand that a little bit better, right? And I understand what a rabbet joint is, right? Because I watched him do it, and I watched him do it a bunch. That to me is the kind of thing that can actually help in those instances when you can't get out there and make it yourself, or you can't buy the tools and try it yourself, and you don't have a project or a reason. But you can kind of learn through osmosis watching that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Or at least have, because we are visual learners, at least have the kind of like dropped in your memory bank of like, okay, well, I've seen somebody do a rabbiting joint or tongue and groove or this or that, and I can remember what the end result is. So when I'm saying I want, a tongue and groove appearance, that I know what I'm actually getting. I mean, that's one of the gifts I believe that architects possess, is being visual learners, like looking at something and saying, okay, that's what I want. How do I reverse engineer that to actually do that? And we're actually pretty damn good at that.
Yeah.
But it's really like understanding, like, okay, I see that. What is that? Tell me about that. Give me some information about what it is that I'm looking at. Talk to the tradesman, talk to the craftsman. I mean, I sat there watching a guy disassemble these 105-year-old double hung windows with the big lead weight in them and everything else. And, we talked about the process. We talked about what he would do to restore these windows. And we talked about just like everything that goes into it, just so
curious, yeah.
I could know exactly what it is. So if I ever run into having to do a historic, renovation or a historic restoration of double hung windows, I understand what I'm asking somebody to do. And then I can also then translate that into the value.
So you know what's going on when the bids come in so high.
Exactly. It's just like, ooh,
you're like, no, that's what it costs.
Yeah, I mean,
I get it.
Let me explain to you what goes, and then I could actually advocate for that particular tradesman or that particular craftsman and say, okay, look, the reason why that price came in, you asked for us to do a restoration of all of your double hung windows. And what goes into that is this, and this. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like
it's not just a note on the page.
Pop. Exactly. It's just like you're not just popping that window out and popping a new window back in kind of thing, which is, where we normally go towards. But you're actually asking somebody with, modern skills and stuff to restore something that might not have necessarily been built right in the first place, but to restore it back to its original, state of being. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take a whole lot.
I was laughing. I have this quick little tangent story, which was a friend of mine was telling me how they went to visit a house that their friend owned, and it had new windows in it. And they were vinyl nail fin windows in an adobe house.
Oh.
Because that's all the contractor does.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to go any farther than that. I just thought we can all like throw up a little bit in our mouths right now.
Exactly.
But where I wanted to go with this was, we grew up watching, like, all we had was This Old House, for instance, right? And or doing it ourselves. Now it's amazing. Like, there's this fantastic Instagram channel called Awesome Framers. I love watching their stuff. They post videos about how they do things and why they do things, and they'll like using this tool today to do this because, man, I've never used a router to cut out windows out of a sheeted house before. It's not how I would have done it, but man, it's way better. It's a cool way, and you get to watch kind of advances in construction technique, advances in tools, and how willing contractors are to pick up on those things because it's safer or it's faster or it's more an expected outcome every time they do it. It's really interesting to watch how willing they are to invest in new tooling for those reasons versus us. It's like, new tool, no thanks. I want to just keep drawing it in CAD or whatever it is. It's like we have so much invested because we sell time for money and we don't actually sell the house, right, or whatever the project is. Right. We're like, we've already invested 1 million years into doing it this way, and we're as fast as we're ever going to be at it. I don't want a new thing that you say is going to make it. I just roll my eyes at that as well. But it is kind of interesting that there's amazing content that's so accessible out there, and it's fun to watch. These guys make it so fun to watch these things, and they've got great personality, and they're not the crusty old contractor. They're like the new school guys who obviously have tons of experience, but they're just fun to watch, and they make it fun. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram,
Yeah.
It's amazing the stuff that's out there. So like, there really is no excuse not to watch this stuff and learn on a daily basis. Like, as you're taking a break, it's scrolling through Instagram, you can subscribe to places like that where it's like, it's not just memes, right?
Totally. Well, I mean, I subscribe to Fine Home Building, but along with that, I also get email blasts and updates, and along with the email updates, there's the There's a podcast. It's a video podcast. There's YouTube channels that like show all of these different things. And so if you're like an architect who's designing a home, I'm hopefully pretty sure you guys probably have subscriptions to those type of magazines or things like that. But if you're asking somebody to actually do some of the things that you do, I mean, what's the best way to do it but to watch tradesmen actually like, how do I do this? Like I need help in framing this eave. Okay, well, I mean, there's, like you said, there's all these different resources that you can go after.
That's amazing.
Which now I've got some more people to add to my resource list.
It's incredible. Another YouTube channel I love watching is The Essential Craftsman. And it's this old guy and his son, and I'm sure he would agree. He is older, but been a contractor his whole life, and it's like now he's capturing this knowledge and putting it onto YouTube. Right? He's building this amazing following of craftsmen. And so he has a fantastically monetized channel as well. And so he's basically creating his retirement, I think, on YouTube. Right. But like, good for him, right? He's also cataloging this information into a very in a very teachable, digestible way. It's very much not like a documentation of just what he's doing, but why he does it that way and what these tools are good for and how you've never one of the most eye-opening videos that he did that I watched was like on this 25-foot Stanley tape measure and all the things it can do that you had no idea a tape measure could do, right? And why it's designed exactly like that. And the amount of play in the tip. So you can measure inside between two things and outside, and the measurement's the same, right? Like because of the thickness of that tip, like it's built into the rivets on the end of the tape measure. And why is there a little slot in the end of that tip? Well, it's so that you can put a nail in, you can hook it on there, and you can draw a radius with your tape measure. Like there's all these things that you just don't know because no one ever showed you. And for somebody to actually take the time, and again, listen, like his son and he are doing this. His son's probably the one who's the digital savvy person, and he's the one with all this knowledge. Like, let's team up and let's make this amazing catalog resource for people here on out. And like, this is how you do it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. We don't do enough of that in architecture either.
Right. Well, okay. So we started talking about how like we grew up watching This Old House, and I've been watching more recently some of the newer episodes of This Old House. And I had noticed, as they start talking about like plumbing and mechanical technologies that go into homes in, like modern home building, the two engineers and contractors that are working on This Old House that are the new engineers, they're younger kids, probably in their 30s, but they are the sons of the original
keep it in the
contractor.
family.
Keeping it in the family, and it's just passing on and stuff. But it's just so interesting that you talk about this father and son team, and it's just like how many different teams of parents to children are information's being passed on to kind of like keep the trade alive, but also advance the trade. It's just kind of interesting. It's just a weird little side note.
I mean, but that's always been how it is in contracting, is the apprenticeship model, right? And except now they're leveraging digital platforms to broaden the audience.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Like, more, please. Yes.
Exactly.
And it's public, right? It's not like, this is how we do it, and we have to keep it a secret, and you're part of the guild, and you'll never tell anybody because we've got this blood handshake, right?
Exactly.
It's not like that at all. It's like, man, like the more people that know about this, the better, right? Because like skilled labor is non-existent, right? So we need to be able to teach people for free how to do this stuff. The education part should be free, and then people can actually take it up and become those people that we want them to become, because the cost of an education should not be a limiting factor. But also just because like we're proud of what we do. We want people to understand it better. We want people to know what goes into these things. And that's what a public platform like, I hate to say those words because like YouTube is still YouTube, right? They could take your videos down and they could censor you, and it's their platform. But ideally, right, this public platform is a place where an algorithm can serve you a video because you just watched one on a set of stairs being built to then move you into like what this tool is good for and what a square is good for and how to use it. And like you go down this rabbit hole of learning that's just incredible. Absolutely incredible resources out there.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff. Well, next time I want to ask you about this architects designing cars thing. Give us a high level overview.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That would be fun. You said you went down that rabbit hole, so maybe a teaser for what we could talk about coming up.
It started off with me, just reading an article about a Heatherwick kind of pairing up with a Chinese company to develop a car, and that kind of started leading me down, this rabbit hole of other architects that have designed cars. And you and I don't know how many other people that we know, friends of the show, just friends of friends, and all this other stuff that are car people as much as anything else. But when I was reading this article, I mean, one of the things that kind of like stood out to me, from Heatherwick, which really honestly kind of like resonated. It was, basically that his design sensibilities, as he was developing his design sensibilities before he really got into architecture, was through car design. And I was just like, yes, exactly. I mean, my whole thought in my future was I was going to do one of two things. I was either going to, when we stood up and they said, okay, tell us what, you're going to be doing in the future. I was like, you're either going to be driving one of my cars or you're going to be walking through one of my buildings.
That's awesome.
Because that was, those were the two paths that I wanted to pursue.
I never considered the whole automotive thing like a real path, but I wish I had now.
Yeah.
Because every time I do it, it's
oh yeah,
the scale of it is just so approachable and understandable, and yet still so technical and complicated. And
think about what you've been doing with the design and construction of just this one effort that you've been doing with your deck, and how like you took control of it because you wanted to control the details, and because everything was tactile to you, everything like what was that like end result, what was that aesthetic that you were trying to reach and stuff. And if you can't think of like, I mean, yeah, we try to say that architecture's like that, but and a lot of times we lose control over like, some of the things that we would really like to do just because of the nature of construction and stuff. We've sort of been kind of highlighting and talking about that, today. But also but car design, I mean, like everything, like virtually everything is sort of designed to, have human hands on. And so that was always something. Yeah. Well, I mean, now, your hands got to be extraordinarily double jointed and, and like be able to like
robots, man. Robots.
Exactly. but yeah, I fell down that rabbit hole, and it's definitely something that I want to talk about.
I think we better finish this episode off with a final thought, which is, all right, let's just stop there. I can't. This is a good cliffhanger. I can't wait to hear more about the cars.
Yeah.